Well, good morning, church. It's good to be with you today. As I mentioned earlier, we had a guest preacher, but that was because I was supposed to be out, but now I'm not out because we were going to a place that a hurricane was also going to go to, so we figured we shouldn't go to it as well. And so I'm here, and so we are arranging him a time when he's going to come and be with us as planned. But as I mentioned earlier, I really believe that whenever things don't go as planned, God is up to something unique. And so that is my heart, and that's my hope today, is that God has a message that all of us need to be here, and that for some reason, I needed to be here today preaching this message. And so I just hope that you will receive that with open hearts to see what God might speak to you. I mean it when I say it. I don't always say this, like, as I was working on the message today, I just felt like God really calling me to a lot of changes in my life and in my perspective that I can already see as being such a blessing to my life and the people around me. And so I know this is going to be a blessing to you. We've been in a series called Find Your New Day. And what we're doing in this series is we are looking at how our faith in Jesus actually changes us and actually changes our life. We want our faith to make a real difference in our life. We want it to impact us in our real life. And what I want to help you see in this series is how our core convictions as a church, and what should be the core convictions of any church, how they actually make a difference in your life. Because maybe you're like me, and sometimes, and I'm a preacher, and I can say this, sometimes you just listen to church stuff, and it might sound good, might sound okay, yeah, that's cool, but what does that mean for my life? Like, how does that change me? And how does it change my life? And so what we're doing is kind of helping you see in this series how the core things that we believe actually impact your life and impact it for the better. And so we've looked at, these past few weeks, we looked at the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, how Jesus saves us by dying on the cross for us and how that changes us. We saw a few weeks ago about deep discipleship, about how we're called to follow Jesus and be like him, that God has ways for us that we have to live out. We looked last week at how the church should feel like a real family and kind of how we live that out as a church community. Like, this should feel like family. And if church doesn't feel like family, then we're not doing it the right way. And so we kind of looked at what that looks like. And today we're coming to a core conviction, which should be the conviction of any church, but for sure is going to be a conviction of our church. And it's this idea of true love. Any church that is not marked by love, like, what in the world are you doing? Love is a core conviction of any church. Love has to be central to what we do. But I want to preach a message today entitled this: what is true love? What is true love? Because maybe you've noticed this. Love is the most misused, misunderstood word in our language today. We say things like, I love this taco, It's like, do you really love, there's some good tacos. Listen, where's Houston, right? Tex-Mex is my favorite food. I'm not lying. But and y'all know I love Pollo Loco, right? I love Chick-fil-A. I love, but would I die for the taco? Probably not, no. We say, I love my house, or I love this band, or I love this movie, or I love the Astros, which I get it. It's good times for the Astros, but do you really love those things? I think in our world today, when we say the word love, I think what we mean is we like. That's what we mean. In our day and age, when we say we love something, or even when we love somebody, what we usually mean is I feel good towards you because somehow you benefit me. I love you. You're awesome, or you're attractive, or you're pleasing to me in some way, and you bring positive value to my life, and I'm glad about that, so I love you. That's what we mean. But that's not true love. George Orwell, in his famous book 1984, made the case that language can corrupt thought. That the way that you can change a culture for the bad is not trying to overtly change it, but begin to take different words in the culture and kind of change what they mean. Because if you can control the language, then you can control how people live. And so, like, if we can change what the word love means, then everyone's going to keep using the word love, and everyone kind of associates love as being a good thing. But if we make it mean something else, then we're going to be drawn to doing something else. And the world does not know what love is because the world doesn't know Jesus. It's kind of like an example of this is the Beatles, the famous song, "Love is all you need." The famous lyric, "Love is all you need," they said. And they got so much money off that song. And then they broke up as a band and hated each other for the rest of their lives. So what was missing? What wasn't working? And what it was is whatever they were saying love wasn't really love. And here's what I know about you, every person in this room. This is true of me and this is true of you. We want true love. No, I take it back. We need true love in our lives. You need it. Every person, every man, every woman, every child, no matter what your background is, you need love. You need to be loved. We don't choose to need to be loved. We just need to be loved. And we all need to know what true love is. We want to know what true love is. And the problem is that we've been burned by somebody along the way. And any person in this room, if you're cynical or you're checked out, it's because somewhere along the way, someone broke your heart. Might have been your mom, might have been your dad, might have been someone that you loved that didn't love you back, might have been a significant person in your life, might have been a friend, might have been a movement, might have been a church. I don't know what it was, but if we are wounded or cynical or hurt, it's somewhere along the way someone broke your heart. Someone told you they loved you, or you sense that they should love you, but they didn't love you. And in fact, the greatest wounds that we cause in the lives of other people are the people that we should have loved or we should be loving, but we're not. The spouse that we should be loving, but we're not really loving them the way Jesus says we should. The child that we should be loving in, the friend or the coworker that we should be loving, but we're not. The greatest wounds in the world are places where there should have been love, but love didn't show up. And yet what Jesus wants to tell you today is what love is, and what Jesus wants to do is to compel you to live a really, truly loving life of true love. Because here's the good news today. You can know what love is, and you can have it. You can know today that you are loved by the God of the universe, and you can build your life into a community, into this church or to some other like authentic church, and you can begin to experience real love that's transformative in your life. If you have a loveless relationship or marriage, love can insert itself. Like there's always hope. You can have true love, but first you have to know what it is, and you have to know what to look for so you can start looking in the right places so that you can experience true love in your life. And there's so many places in the Bible that I could take us today to look at this, but one of my favorite, if you have a Bible, turn there with me to 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. And if you're new to the Bible, this is a little bit confusing because there's a book called John in the Bible at the beginning of the New Testament. The New Testament is like the second part of the Bible. It's like the last fourth of the Bible. There's a book called John at the beginning of the New Testament, but this is like 1 John. And so there's a book called John in the New Testament, and then a book called 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. Super confusing, right? But that's how you know they're not making it up, right? Because if someone was just making this up, they would not have made it like this, okay? This shows that it is very authentic. So it's 1 John. So the Gospel of John is a kind of big book in the New Testament. This is a very short book, kind of towards the end of the Bible. 1 John chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. And as you're turning there, I want to give you a little bit of context because we're just hopping into this book. 1 John is written by the disciple John that we read about in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the different gospel accounts. We see there's a disciple named John. And in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he's like a young buck disciple guy. In the book of Acts, goes on to be one of the leaders of the early church. And what's cool about 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John at the end of the Bible is he's writing these letters at the end of his life. And so this is old man John. This is Grandpa John right here. This is, and don't you love listening to like older men or women at the maybe like the later years of their life, and they got the wisdom. They got the stories, like I want to tell you like it is. I want to tell you something, like I love that kind of stuff. Halsey's grandfather, my wife, before he passed away, we'd go to their farm every Christmas, and this dude was legitimate an East Texas lumberjack, like authentic, like lumberjack guy. His life was chopping down big trees in East Texas and turning it into like real legit wood. He was a logger, and he looked like it, and he was a scary man, but he had some incredible stories. And I don't know what it is about older people. They can tell better stories. Young people tell better stories, right? Learn how to build attention, get some humor. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, older people, they just tell better stories. They know how to build attention and keep you interested. They kind of exaggerate a little bit to make it better, but like they have all of this wisdom. And in this moment, as we're reading this text today, this is the disciple John, who has gone through so much in his life. He's now an older man, and he's basically just sharing his wisdom in his old age. And what's really cool about John in this season of his life is he's no longer talking from theory. It's no longer kind of what a lot of young people, what we think it's like. We've never done anything. Never done anything. It's like young people today, you want to graduate and get a great job, get paid. You've never done nothing. You've never built a company. You've never helped. Like we just live in an entitlement world today. And what I love about John is he's actually done it. He's been faithful. He's been a leader in the church. He's made disciples. He's seen God do incredible things. He's kept the faith. He's loved the people around him. And so what he is sharing with us today is tried and true. And what is interesting with the disciple John here in his old life is he is the only disciple that we know of that wasn't martyred for his faith. They tried to martyr him. He was actually boiled alive. They tried to kill him, but he survived. Kind of like Darth Vader, but he wasn't bad, Like they tried, they thought they had him, but he survived. And so he's in his old age. He's wounded. He's got scars all over his body. And I love this letter in 1 John because there's two really important kind of themes in this book. The first is truth. Talks a lot about truth, about light and darkness. Like John is really good at kind of calling people, on their lies, on the places in their life that are fake. He's definitely a tell it like it is kind of guy. He talks a lot about truth and knowing the truth and actually walking in the truth and not just saying stuff. But he also talks a lot about love. Talks a lot about love and how life is really just all about love and what love actually is. And he gives us in 1 John 3, verse 16 through 18, I think maybe the most clear, succinct definition of love, and I hope that you never forget this for the rest of your life. So I'm going to read this for us, but one of the things we love to do is to stand in the honor of reading God's word. So this time, if you would stand with me to show that we are ready to receive this word. 1 John 3, starting in verse 16, it says, "By this we know love, that Jesus laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay our lives down for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth." May God bless the reading of his word. You can be seated. So if you are new to New Day, you've probably heard me say this before. I'm one of those guys that got theories or ways that I think we should change things, and no one listens to me, but I just keep saying them because maybe eventually we'll try one of these out. And I can say what I'm about to say with confidence. One, because I have been married. I am married. And number two, because I'm a pastor and I do a lot of weddings. So I've walked with a lot of couples through getting married, and I've done a lot of weddings. I think 1 year early on, I did like 10 weddings in a year. That was intense, right? I got to stand on a stage, in 10 different people's biggest moments of their life 10 times in 1 year. It was intense, right? And I actually do like doing weddings, but if I'm honest, kind of going back to kind of 1 John, just kind of how he wants to tell it like it is, like I've kind of always thought that we should do the whole wedding and marriage and celebration thing differently. My theory is whenever somebody gets married, you should do a very nondescript, not big celebratory ceremony. You should have a little small, under the radar kind of wedding. And then after you've been married for 10 years, then we should all come together in celebration, do a party, invite the guests, get the cake, get the flowers, get everybody dressed up because, dadgummit, you did it. If you're still in love, then we should celebrate. Because if you're honest, and no offense if you're about to get married, listen, I did a wedding, you should do it. I'm just talking. But like, you celebrate, like you've not been married. What are we celebrating? Usually you're young, you look as good as you're ever gonna look, you're still hiding back all your junk, you're not really letting out who you really are yet, and we're gonna celebrate. We're celebrating that you've decided to try this out. Right? Like, and then it's like 10 years and nobody cares. Someone sends you a card, or maybe someone likes your Facebook post. But for real, like, when we're like, yay, this is awesome. But real love, can I get a witness, comes after the wedding. It's in the marriage. And I can testify this to the deepest part of who I am because my wife and I we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And I struggle with being like thoughtful. Like I'm not good at thinking about gifts and stuff. And so that's just not my gift. And so, but I did it right this year, okay? I got it right. And so y'all know I will tell you when I get it wrong. I love sharing all my failures, but I got this one right. And I want to share a couple of pics up here. This is us. And let me tell you how I did this, because this is, and all you ladies are going to love this. So in this chapel is the first place that my wife and I ever met or saw each other. This is at Houston Baptist, at Houston Christian University in Sharpstown. That chapel called Beeland Chapel was the first place that we ever met. And then we got married in that chapel. And whenever I proposed to her, I proposed in that chapel we went on like a nice date, and then we went walking around campus, and I just happened to have a stumble into the room, and I proposed to her there. And so on our 10-year anniversary, we went out for a nice meal, and I said, hey, let's go, just kind of walk around the campus like we did last time. And she had no idea, but I had the chapel reserved for us. I had some friends and family to take pictures and to set it up all nicely. I got it reserved by the campus. They were so gracious to let me use it. And we stumbled in, and she just did not expect it. And as we walked down the aisle that we had walked down 10 years ago to get married, I had it littered with pictures of the last 10 years of our life. This was like from a movie, guys. I got this one right, okay? Like she's crying, I'm crying. It was amazing, okay? It was so cool, And we had this moment, and then I had even the next picture is, this is one of my pastors, Pastor Russell, who comes here sometimes. And Pastor Russell was the one that married us on that stage 10 years prior. So I had him arranged to come out, and we renewed our vows in that moment to each other. And in the first 10 years of our marriage, we have been through a lot. We've gone through a lot of different things, some great times and some very difficult times. And we got to stand on that stage and not just renew our vows together, but to renew them in such a way with the past in mind, knowing that we actually meant it this time. And what I want to tell you is this. That experience that we had just a few months back was 20 times better. It was 100 times more meaningful than our actual wedding ceremony. I remember both days. I remember what they were like. And I think it's important to say that because love in essence is often so different than just an expression. And so often we are willing to express love to somebody or express love to family or to a church. We'll say it or we'll kind of emotionally express it, but it's a totally different thing to actually do the things that love requires. And so I want to lay out for you what that looks like so that we can have true love in our life. And I'll start by looking at just verse 16, what we read. It says in 1 John 3:16, "By this we know love, that he, being Jesus, laid down his life for us." And what we see here is this, is that Jesus is the definition of true love. If you're taking notes, write that down. Jesus is the definition of true love. I love how he says, "By this we know love." Because what he's saying is, don't assume you know what love is. By this we know. Once again, this old man John, he's like, don't assume. Don't just listen to the Beatles. Don't just listen to like 90s rom-coms and what they kind of define love as. Jesus is the definition. By this we know. So here's how we're going to know. We need to know. And here's how we know that Jesus laid down his life for us. And so how do we know what true love is? By looking at Jesus. What in the world is true love? Or how do I love people? Or how do I know if somebody loves me? Here's what John says. Look at Jesus. Let Jesus be the standard. And the reality is, get this, no matter what you believe today, no matter who you are, what you believe, if you're like an agnostic, if you don't know what you believe, if you're atheist, if you're, Catholic, if you're whatever you think you are, if you don't think, whatever you believe, you have a definition of love. But the problem with most people is they have no idea where their definition comes from. They've just picked it up from the world. They've just picked it up from the culture. And not only that, but most people don't know exactly what the perfect image of love would be. Someone might say, well, maybe it's my spouse, or it's my mom, or it's someone who I really admire, or they're great, or it's a celebrity, or whatever, or this person that I admire. I view this person as the definition of love, but here's the problem with that. They're imperfect. And when you begin to allow an imperfect version of love, you begin to allow the love in your life to be imperfect. But Jesus is perfect. And here's what's important to note. If we cheapen the definition of love, or if we lower it, then we lower what it means when we hear that God loves us. And so if you see love as like a person in your life, or if you think that you're loved, but you're not perfect, then you're going to allow an imperfect definition. So now you've kind of settled love is kind of good, but not great. And now when someone says they love you, or when God says they love you, you don't get the full weight of that because you have cheapened the sense of love. And so what John says is Jesus is the definition of true love. This is how we know true love. This is what we are aiming for. We want this kind of love. And then he goes on in verse 16 to say, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. That word brothers just means the community or the church or the people closest to us. But he says we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. And it comes to this, that true love is death. You want to know what true love is? True love is death. Because Jesus is the definition of love. Here's what love is. To lay down your life, to lay down your wants, to lay down your desires for the good of another. Have you ever wondered why? Think about this. Think about your life. Everybody around you would say they're a loving person, wouldn't they? Maybe you have the one cynical dude in your life who's all contrarian, but generally speaking, I'm a loving person. Everyone's, I'm a loving person. But we look at the world, and the world's so jacked up. So why is that? If everyone's a loving person, if everybody says they're a loving person, then how come the world has so much pain, so much brokenness, so much dysfunction everywhere? Every family, every marriage, every job, every situation, every nation, why is it all jacked up? Probably because people aren't really loving. They say they are, but then when you have this definition, true love is death, if you really defined it like this, that true love is to die, is to give your life for another, is to lay down your wants, your desires, your interests for another. If that was the definition of love, if people were honest, a lot of people would probably say, you know what, I don't want to be loving. I'm not a loving person. I'm about me and my life and my self-interest. And then all of a sudden it would make sense. We would know why the world's broken. It wouldn't be confusing. It would make sense. And so the problem in the world is everyone is saying that they're loving, but if we actually were loving the way Jesus says we should be loving, then we would be living in a very different, much more truly loving and peaceful world. Everyone says that they're loving, but will we really lay down our lives for someone that's not ourselves? Will we really consider those people that are different than us or come from different places than us? Will we put their interests above our own? Because that's what love is. And we don't just get to say we're loving, we have to be loving. And that's what John is saying here. See, when we say love in our world today, we're expressing usually an emotional sentiment, but it's not real love, and therefore we don't get the fruits of what real love would be. In Romans 5, verses 6 through 8, Paul says, "For while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare to even die. But God shows his love. God shows his love for us, and that while we were sinners, Christ died for us." Paul makes that correlation one more time. He loves us. He shows his love. Doesn't say his love, he shows his love. And that while we were sinners, Christ died for us, because the Bible teaches that we're all broken, we're all sinful. It's not just you. I'm there with you, but God wants to make us new. But we can't pick ourselves up out of the hole that we created. So God, in Christ Jesus, comes into the world, dies on the cross for our sins. And when we place our faith and our trust in him, he gives us a brand new life now and forever for all eternity. But true love is death. And here's where it gets really good. That's why it makes sense, why it's hard. It's like people say things like, "I'm married and it's hard. What's wrong?" Nothing's wrong. It's supposed to be hard. Death is hard. Why is parenting so hard? Because you love them. For real. Why is family so hard? Why is serving at your workplace and working, why is it hard? What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? No, you're doing it right. Pain is the receipt of love. To go to a restaurant and you order something, they give you a receipt, a proof of purchase that you actually paid for this thing. Pain, get this, is the receipt of love in life. If it's not painful, it's not love. You're like, well, what if it hurts? Or what if I'm miserable? And what if it doesn't feel good? Well, pain is the proof, because you should never trust a love that doesn't hurt. And this is not that you should stay in an abusive situation. It's always important to note those kinds of things. This isn't like abuse, because God's design, abuse is when one person is sacrificing and the other person is just taking advantage and using. And that's abusive. That's wrong. That's not good. So it's wrong if neither are sacrificing for the other. It's abusive if only one is sacrificing. God's design in marriage and family and church is that everybody is sacrificing for everybody. It's a beautiful thing. But there is a sacrifice, and what we have to do in every relationship, in every place where we're loving, is we have to reimagine the pain. Reimagine the pain as a confirmation that you are actually loving somebody. Jesus literally went to the cross and died. He was willing to do it, but it was painful and it hurt. And because it hurt, it didn't mean that it was wrong. And this is why you cannot fall out of love. Whenever someone says that, say, no, you chose to stop loving. You can't fall out of love, because love is an action. You can't fall out of love. What you're saying is, I don't feel the warm fuzzies anymore, but that was never love in the first place. That the problem is we often tend to shirk back when it gets painful or difficult, and that's when it actually is becoming truly loving. That's the moment that we should be encouraged and not discouraged. And what the Bible tells us is that love is painful, but love is strong, and that's what makes love beautiful, is that it's resilient. And so speaking of like weddings or romantic relationships, we often read the famous 1 Corinthians 13. I almost had like canons in D in the background while I was reading this, but I didn't have time to arrange all that because I didn't know I was even preaching this week. So 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8, it's the famous, beautiful love passage where it says, love is patient and love is kind, and it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And we read that, and you know what we say? That's so beautiful. It's beautiful. That's so sweet. It's so like warm fuzzies, It just makes you feel all gooey inside, But that's not what he's saying. This is Paul. Like hardcore apostle Paul, like shipwrecked, always in prison. The dude was like a rough writer. He wasn't like, like just walking around like writing poems all the time. This dude was like hardcore. And what he's saying is love is strong. That's what he's saying. The point of this passage is love never fails. It never quits. It never gives up. It never walks away. Real love is strong. Real love never gives up. That's why it will go all the way to the grave for someone that it truly loves. And can you imagine if we filled our lives with that kind of love? Can you imagine if we had that kind of love in our marriage? I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Can you imagine if we had it, if we were modeling that in our workplace? Can you imagine if we had that kind of true love here in the church community? That God's vision and God's design is a church and a community where everybody is loving each other and we are meeting one another's needs. I love it. It's like when you do a back rub or something and like you give yourself a back rub, it doesn't feel as good. I don't know what that is. There's probably some science behind that, but when my wife gives me a back rub, it feels way better. Like in the church community, in our marriage, in our relationships, that we are loving and serving each other in all these various different ways. But I love going to verse 17 real quick. He says, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? I love Grandpa John right here because here's what he says. Straight up, true love is practically generous. True love is practically generous. I get the word practical when he says has the world's goods. And so this isn't just like spiritual stuff. This isn't just like I'm going to be praying for you kind of stuff. This is like the world's goods, has real stuff in the real world, and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, meaning doesn't help or doesn't give. How does God's love abide in him? So if someone has things or ways they can help or serve and they don't help anybody, how does God's love abide in him? And I love that because that kind of stings. That God can look at us and say, how does my love abide in you if you don't help anybody? And what is interesting to note here, and what you don't hear about a lot, is the Bible, there is a lot of precedence for we do have to prioritize the people in our family or the people in our spiritual family. There is a healthy way of prioritizing that. And this is a whole different rabbit trail, so I don't want to go down it too much. But that word brother in the original language is intentional, and it implies family or spiritual family. And so we are to help just anybody. We are to be generous at large, but we have a calling to be uniquely generous to the people in our family and the people in our church because we're creating a loving community and we're fostering it in such a way that people will see what's happening in different churches all across the world and want to be a part of those, not just so that we can come and meet their needs, but so we can ultimately meet their spiritual needs. And so this is why we tithe as a church. This is why we serve together as a church family. Like I mentioned this right now, like right now, every single week, there are people that are not in this room right now because they are serving in our kids' ministry. We have I think 20-something people that serve every week in our kids' ministry. Adults that are not in here right now because they are teaching our kids about Jesus and also giving us some time to focus, amen? And so like they are over there, and listen, it's not because they just like, I feel gifted to work with kids. If you feel gifted to work with kids, that's awesome. But even if you don't feel gifted, we still need 20 people over there with the kids. I hate it when you go to church, well, what do you feel good at? It's like, well, do you feel good at greet team, running the live stream, or kids? Because that's what we need, okay? You know, which one of those three feels the closest to what you want to do, you know, and pick one, like, please. Like, I don't know, was Jesus uniquely good at washing feet? I mean, maybe, but he just washed the feet because he loved them. It's like, I feel the spiritual gift of washing feet. That'd be gross, you know, like that's a creeper, right? You don't want to have that gift, you know? Like, I don't trust that person, right? And so, like, yeah, there's gifts, but it's like, you have a need. And I love you enough to meet that need. See, in the gospel, Jesus takes our sin on himself and shares his perfection with us. And so as we serve our friends, as we serve our spouse, our family, our church, we are saying, we are living out the gospel of Jesus in a very practically generous way. There's a real need, and I want to meet it. And yeah, we should be praying for each other, but we should also be giving and serving. And we've had people in this church, they can't pay the rent, someone pays the rent. Happens all the time in our church, all the time. Someone doesn't have money for a car, someone doesn't have this, someone has legal troubles, this person's a lawyer. I cannot tell you the hundreds of times I've seen that happen in the church. And we don't usually publicize those a lot because we don't want to publicize those kind of needs, but I'm telling you, it actually happens in the church all of the time. And it's because we are actually trying to live out this idea of love. And I think besides the idea of death, I think, and this is a very helpful thing for me, and maybe it'll be helpful for you, I think one of the most helpful images of love is this idea of oneness. And Jesus prays for this, and right before he's crucified in John 17, he's going to be crucified on the cross. And his prayer for the church is that they would be one. His final prayer is that we would be one. And he says it this way in John 17. Jesus is praying to the Father. He says, I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory you have given me, I've given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one, I and them and you and me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me and love them, even as you love me. So he says this, the world's going to know that we have the truth and that we know the one true God when we just live as one together. I mean, the boundaries are broken down, and we don't see what we have or possess as just existing for us or for our glory or for our promotion, but for everybody. I don't just have money to spend it all on myself. God has given me money, and some of it's for me, and some of it is for everyone else that I'm called to love. When you get to that place, you are actually a loving person, and if you've not gotten to that place, you are not living love. That I have this house, and yes, it's for me. Part of it is for me, but it's also for other people. We want to bless people with this home, or we want to open it up for a community group, or whatever you want to do. This belongs to me, but I also want to use it for other people. And I use this example all the time, but it's so good, so I'm going to use it again. For me, one of the greatest examples is like, you ever had like that really good friend in your life, that the friend that literally became family to you? I've been blessed with a few of those friends, and one of the best examples of that in my life is a guy that some of you in this room probably actually know, Big Joe. I grew up with a guy named Big Joe. In high school, I have a picture of him. This is Big Joe. Anyway, it's kind of blurry, but you get the point, right? This is Big Joe. Big Joe's a big dude, 6'3", 230. He said probably 240, you know. Big Joe, man, for a season of life, we did life together. Maybe you remember the days, man, I don't want to be like old guy, but like I'm on the path to be an old guy like Grandpa John here, and like I just remember a world before smartphones. Man, before smartphones, like I'm the guy that's like, I knew where my friends were because the bikes were out in front of the house. I'm that guy. You know how you went and saw if your friend wanted to play with you? You know what you did? I remember those days. I lived through those days. And Big Joe, there was a season we did life together, and we became such good friends that everything that we had began to blur together. Big Joe, he lied and got like a hardship license when he was 15 years old. So he got like an actual license where he could drive because he said he had a need but didn't really have a need. And so he lied, he got a hardship license. So he was like an actual driver at 15, and his family gave him like this like really nice like blue Chevy Silverado pickup. And Joe and I were so close and so tight and such good friends that like when he got a truck, it was like I got a truck. And so I'm 15 and I can't drive and I don't have a car, but he's got a car. But the moment he got a car, we were so tight, I could go anywhere I wanted at any time, because if I called Joe and said, hey, can you take me to Kroger or to this friend's house out here, he would always come. Joe never said, no, I can't make it. He picked me up for school every day. We went everywhere together. We did everything together. I was in a like a little rock band at the time, and so like he was our manager, and he would load up all of our stupid gear into his truck, and he'd drive us to the club or the bar, wherever we were playing that weekend, and he was always there. And if I was playing basketball, he was playing basketball. If I was doing a show, he was at the show. If he was going to football practice, I was at football practice with him. I mean, we did everything together for a season of life. There was a oneness to our relationship, and what healthy love looks like in your marriage, in your relationships, in your church, is to begin to see it like that. And it's not socialism, because it's not compelled or enforced. You don't have to do it. It's a free will love offering. And we have to be intentional about following Jesus in this, because the world is all about building your life and your kingdom and your thing and what you're doing and your whatever. Building your wealth just for your family. And Jesus is saying you need to be a practically generous person with everything that you have. And so the last verse that I want to close with is verse 18. He finishes here. He says, little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. And so here's what he says. True love is action. That's what true love is. I love this because it's like even 2,000 years ago, people were just saying the word love and not living it out. I love that. It's not just us. It's not just our time. It's not just our world. There's an inclination that we have, but Grandpa John today is here calling it out, because he's seen some stuff in his life. Dude's literally like lived for the gospel, spread the gospel. They tried to kill him, boiled him to death, but he didn't die, and he's still living and telling his story and his tell. And he's saying, listen, Jesus really loves you, and Jesus really died for you. Jesus really meets our needs in this life, and so we now have the opportunity to respond by loving. And I love this word that Pastor James has been using a lot recently. He talks about, he uses the word demystify. And sometimes in church or in spiritual stuff, we get to like ethereal spiritually, you know? And like the preacher's like talking, it sounds good, but what does it mean for my life? Like, what do I do? And it's like, oh, that sounds or feels good or gives me the warm fuzzies, but doesn't change anything. And what the Bible says is the Spirit of God literally dwells inside of you if you are a Christian, and it compels you to live a different kind of way. And I love this because we demystify love by just saying, love to me is how I'm actually loving you and serving you. It has nothing to do with how I feel. If I feel the warm fuzzies, there's nothing wrong with warm fuzzies. I like warm fuzzies. Maybe you like warm fuzzies, but I don't have to have warm fuzzies to love you. In fact, when I love and serve you, when I don't have the warm fuzzies, that is the most loving that I could ever be, because that's how I know that I'm genuine and authentic. See, truly loving people, they don't search for feelings, they search for opportunities to serve and to give. Truly loving people know that feelings come and go, And we have no idea why feelings come and go, so we're not controlled by that. Instead, we are controlled by wanting to actually be able to love and to serve people. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of the blessing of clarity in your life, like demystify it. I love my spouse by X. Fill in the blank. Know that answer. I love my church by, fill in the blank. I love my church by serving on, I don't know, the kids' team or whatever. I love my church by giving. I love, like demystify. Don't leave it ambiguous or ethereal or a feeling. Like fill in the blank. And if you don't know how to love someone, just ask them. Like, when was the last time you asked someone that you love, how can I love and serve you better? They'll tell you, and you can do it. And look at you. You're a loving person. You will leave here today, and every relationship in your life could be better than it is if you say, how can I love you? And then just do it. Assuming it's not like weird or sinful, right? Like how can I love you? Demystify love. I love my community by fill in the blank. Because he says in verse 18, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. Let's be real. True love is your schedule and your bank statement. Demystify. True love is where you give your time and where you give your money. And Jesus invites us to take those things and to take a step in the right direction. And I know we say, I work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. The good news is you got 167. There's a lot of hours in a week. True love is action. And so as we draw to a close, here's what I want you to know today. Number one, Jesus is the definition of love. So how I define love is Jesus. He is the definition. He is a standard. Number two, I want you to know that true love is practical and actionable, that we demystify it. But then here's the final charge today. To be totally driven by love in every single thing that you do in your life. What would it look like in your life to be driven by love in everything that you do? You see, here's the big issue today for all of us. This is the issue for me, and so I'm sure this is probably the issue for you. The big issue is we want to be loving people, we want to love and we want to serve, but we're really busy. And we have a lot going on and we have a lot to do. Because somewhere along the way, somebody convinced us or somehow we got this sense that my life needs to look exactly like this. Or I need to accomplish these things. Or I need to be this kind of parent. Or I need to make partner. Or I need to have this kind of house. Or I need to have this much money. Or I need to accomplish this in my life. And so we are a driven culture and society. And so we get on this path. I need to have this. I need to be awesome at my job. I need to be awesome at everything. I need to have, be in incredible shape, whatever it is. I have to have this thing, right? So we make this thing up, and we live all of our life just kind of pursuing this goal or this thing. And because we're so obsessed with this thing, we don't have time to love, and our life will become more about just like using the people along the way that help us to kind of get to those goals, if we're honest, maybe. And yet one of the themes in the Bible that I love talking about because it is present in every single major person and character in the Bible. And I love saying this because it's important for your life. You have to know this. Every single person in the Bible, Abraham, Moses, David, Peter, Paul, everybody, their life was radically different than they thought it was going to be. So every person in the Bible, they thought their life was going to be like this. And somewhere along the way, God totally frustrated all of their plans and said, no, you're not doing that. You're going this other direction. No one's life went just like they thought it was going to go. And when they were willing to accept God's plan for their life, that was when God did an incredibly loving thing in their life to God and to people. And so here's what happens in life. Everyone, every person in this room, your life is turning out to be, in some ways, a lot different than you thought it was going to be. And somewhere along the way, we have this idea of what life should be like. And so we're just constantly chasing that thing, but then we're not quite getting that thing. And so we become discontent with our life. And we're pushing harder, and we're pushing harder, and we're really busy, and it's got to happen. But eventually we come to a place where we realize that God is actually frustrating our plans because he has a bigger plan for our life. And imagine if you were to go to someone and say, hey, what do you want to do with your life? What's the purpose in your life? What do you want to do with your life? And someone's like, well, I want to have a family, or I want this career or whatever. Can you imagine if you ask someone, what do you want to do? I want to love. I want to love God, and I want to love as many people as I can with my life. That's an awesome life. Like, at the funeral, it's not like, yeah, Joe made partner, woo, it's like, Joe was really good at Frisbee golf, It's like, what does that mean? That when Jesus was asked, what is the sum of all the law? He said to love God, to love people. The aim of your life is to love. And you can do that through whatever job you have, through whatever your family ends up looking like, through whatever your health ends up being like. That God will frustrate our plans so that we can come to a place where we say, I am fully driven by love. What would it look like this week for you to say, listen, I want to be driven by love in everything I do? In the fun moments and the hard conversations at work, at home, with my spouse, what would your life look like? How fulfilling would your life be if every single thing you did this week was in love? As Paul says in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 14, he says, do everything in love. And the kind of love that Jesus shows us. As a famous church father says, God regards not the greatness of the work, but the love with which it is performed. Now, we can't control how great anything we do in this life is in terms of scale, but we can determine with the intensity of love that every action is done. Church, let this be a recentering moment for you. That you see, man, love is to be like Jesus. Love is to consider others because Jesus considered me over himself and went to the cross. Love is practical. I can love today. I can make a decision today. And love is action to where I can be a truly loving person in everything in my life. Church, may everything you do this week be done in love. And we can do that, and we can make a difference in the lives of others, and it will be satisfying in our souls.